Keith Haring was born in 1958 in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. He grew up in the 60s in a middle-class American family, influenced by Walt Disney and his father, an amateur cartoonist. Haring was too young to take part in the political turbulence of the 60s, but that same spirit was to emerge later in his work.
Most of my, I suppose, political concerns and social concerns came from, my life experience. I mean, partly being being born in the 60s, or late 50s, and growing up in the 60s, and sort of being around the quote-unquote counterculture, but not being able to participate in it, but definitely being very affected by it, and being at the age at that time when I was, I think, most impressionable, and seeing things like the Vietnam War when I was 10 years old, and seeing race riots on television. And at about 12, I started delivering newspapers, and I started a newspaper route which I delivered every day, including Sundays. Every day after school, and on a bicycle usually. And this was also actually probably interesting because it meant that from 12 until 16, which is 1970 till 1974, every day I was reading the front page of the newspaper. And this was during the end of the Vietnam War and then into Watergate. And Sundays, it was also...
He was commissioned to build various sculptures, such as this huge piece for a children's hospital in Long Island. It was forged in a steel factory in Connecticut and assembled and unveiled at the hospital in the presence of the young patients.
I think it was very nice of whoever made that statue to dedicate it to the hospital. I think that was really nice of him. I think it stands for peace.
I think there's a lot of things about art that have a lot to do with healing that a lot of people haven't really scientifically explored, but I think it's definitely helpful for children to be around art, especially when they're around it in a hospital situation, so they feel more comfortable about being there, but also just thinking positive about everything, which is a part of healing and feeling.
He just insisted, okay, now this year I have a show in Paris, and I have a show in Milano, and I have a show in wherever, and that's great, and I've got to produce all this work, but I insist that when I go to be present at my exhibition in whatever country or city, I also want to do something lasting and meaningful that will remain, something that will help people, and something that brings joy. And so that is why even today, in any number of cities around the world, there remain Keith Haring murals, because fortunately people value them not for their art market value, but for their spirit.
Haring deals with the issues of today. In the mid-'80s, the disaster of crack was invading the city. Haring's work spoke to people living on the fringes of society, to children, to minorities. As Haring gained their respect, he felt the responsibility to speak out on the issues that touched their lives.
From a personal experience of a friend that had, gotten involved with crack and wanted to have help, and couldn't get help, and went to city hospitals, city agencies, kept getting turned away over and over, I became, really personally aware of how drastic the situation was at the time. And the thing that was needed most at that time was really public awareness to prevent other people from getting involved in it.
I've been approached by a man from a museum in Berlin, at the museum called the House at Checkpoint Charlie, which is a museum that's dedicated to sort of human rights issues, and he has asked me if I'm interested in painting the Berlin Wall, which of course I am interested in painting. I'm painting this continuous interlocking chain of human figures which are connected at the hands and the feet, and they're alternating between red and black on a yellow ground, so it's the German colors, and really about this sort of, obviously somehow about this unity of people and against the idea of the wall, which is separating the people.
ACT UP was the AIDS Coalition Unleash Power. It was a political group fighting to get the government to take notice of the AIDS epidemic that was happening, to get testing through the National Institute of Health, the NIH, get tests made faster, there's so much bureaucracy in medical research at the time. And through the efforts of ACT UP, they changed the way the US government was dealing with AIDS. And it was a very creative way to protest. When Keith was diagnosed with AIDS, he became a big part of ACT UP.
Now I fit exactly the classifications of actually having AIDS. So for the first time it was a reality that now it was going to begin to happen to me, and now I had to deal with it. It's like I knew that it was going to happen, but somehow that doesn't prepare you anymore for that moment when you know that that's it. And the first thing to do is just, you break down, whatever. Went and sat by the river and cried and cried and cried and cried. But then it's like, well, you can't just, it's like you have to go on. You get yourself together and you realize that this is not the end right there, and that there's other things, and you've got to continue, and you've got to figure out how you're going to deal with it and confront it and face it.